Hi! Lots of us like to record our sessions in FS 2020 as well as create screenshots of some of the amazing scenery in the application. This video will explore a number of things you can do to improve your results, from composition ideas to different screen capture methods, how to leverage lighting and movement to help you create dynamic video shots. This video is broken up into 3 sections that cover specific areas. Part 1 is this introduction to the video, and it discusses overall concepts for creating videos. Part 2 covers prepping for recording, screen capture, and editing. Part 3 covers lighting, camera movement, and composition. Here's an example of a cinematic video made from FS 2020 by yours truly. We'll talk about some of the ideas used in this sequence after it runs.
SoCal approach Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is type Cessna Skyhawk 3 miles north of Van Nuys. Request flight following. Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha SoCal approach.
It establishes that our location is the airport at night, and it reinforces this with some ATC chatter. Then we show the dawn of a new day, then a number of different shots showing activity around the airport. We move towards a hangar and cut to a few more shots of the airport, and then back to the hangar and we go inside. Then we see various shots of an aircraft, and this is followed by seeing the aircraft prepping to taxi with a pushback, then idling on the runway, a quick glance at the crew in the cockpit, and finally lifting off the runway and flying off into the sun. I used a zoom transition to go into the hangar. There's a link in the description for a video to show how to create this effect. This sequence attempts to tell a story, albeit a very simple one, but it's important to tell a story. Sometimes a video can just be pretty visuals with no narrative thread, and those are just fine, but generally people will find a narrative human story to be more compelling. Stories can be broken down into 3 parts: beginning, middle, and end, just like takeoff, flying, and landing. You can leverage that to structure your video. In this sequence, the beginning establishes the location, the middle shows us the details of the location and introduces the main subject, and the ending shows the prep and takeoff. The sequence was matted to make it look widescreen. This also lends itself to a more cinematic look for your videos. I'll show how to implement this later in the video. The music is chosen to evoke a specific feeling. Each cut or action element in the sequence is cut to the beat of the music. It's a common practice to do this, but sometimes it can be a bit much if your video is long. It's good to let the viewer have a little break from that kind of cutting idea now and then. I'll leave a link in the video in the description that shows how to do this kind of cutting using DaVinci Resolve, which is my personal video editor of choice. Each shot in the previous sequence is carefully chosen and composed. The reasons for these choices will be explored in the 3rd part of this video. With all that taken care of, let's move on to capturing and prepping for capture. Stuttering and jitter are your enemy in capturing video from FS 2020. You need to make sure that you have your system tuned, otherwise you won't get the desired results. Resolution, clouds, air traffic, vehicle and human traffic at airports, all of this can affect your FPS. If you're trying to tune your system, make sure you change only one element at a time and then test it out before you change more and then retest. Otherwise, you won't know which adjustment you made gave you the desired result. If you find you're having issues with stuttering or frame rates, you might want to turn off all air traffic and ground traffic. This can have a big impact on your FPS. Another thing you might want to do is turn off all notifications that the game gives. Also turn off navigation markers and finally the HUD itself. Under Options, General, Traffic, you can control the traffic elements like this. At the top, ensure the traffic type is set to off unless you specifically want to capture those elements in your video. You can set these settings here to 0 as well. Under the camera section, all the way at the bottom, you can turn off the HUD, and this will remove the aircraft instrument display that's shown on the external camera view. When you leave this screen, you'll be prompted to save your changes, so go ahead and do that. That takes care of traffic. Let's look at the assistance screen. Make sure that you set navigation aids and notification to hard. This will ensure that these elements don't show up in your screen recordings or screenshots. If you still have FPS issues after these changes, you'll need to look at other settings such as resolution and graphics settings. Weather and especially live weather options can play a part in reducing your FPS. You may have to opt for the clear skies setting. Finally, you should ensure that there are no other applications running when you run your application for capture purposes. Any other application running will be stealing resources from FS 2020 and can cause slowdowns or loss of FPS. Ideally, only FS 2020 and/or your capture application should be running. If you're an old pro at using Windows Xbox Game Bar Recorder, you might want to skip ahead to the section on Active Presenter for doing recordings in resolutions higher than 1080. I'll preface this section by saying that any screen recording software can negatively impact your game's performance. It has to share your system's resources with the capture application. Something to keep in mind when you experience an FPS slowdown in FS 2020. Windows 10 includes a free recording solution for gaming called the Xbox Game Bar. By default, you can invoke its UI with the Windows G key combination. The most recent update to it allows you to invoke it without a game running, but it will not capture any video or screenshots unless a game is running. It does have its limitations. It will only record a maximum of 1080. If you're looking to record 4K or more, you'll need another solution, and I'll cover that in a few minutes. The Game Bar also allows you to take screenshots. These will be the full resolution of your screen and are very high quality. The UI has a nice gallery where you can look at your captures and play or delete them. You have a settings option up here with this gear icon. You can use that to set hotkeys for the Game Bar here if the default ones are not to your liking, or if they conflict with your game in some way. In the upper left, here are the icons for performing a number of common tasks. This button will take a screenshot of the current game screen. This one will capture the last few minutes of gameplay. It has a replay feature where it can be recording constantly. This is useful when something has already happened in the game and you'd like to record it. You can set the amount of time that it's recording in the background using the control panel, and we'll look at that in a moment. You can cause it to save this recording buffer without using the UI, just invoke it with Alt-Windows-G. Moving right, we come to the Record button. This button will commence recording of the current game screen. It will continue to record until you tell it to stop. While recording, you'll have this little window on the right side of the screen. You can use it to stop the recording. It also acts as a recording in progress indicator. The window is fixed in position and can't be moved by the user. You can also use it to mute the microphone as well. You can either click on the stop icon or you can press the record hotkey by pressing Alt-Windows-R. That same key combination can be used to invoke a recording on demand as well. The Game Bar Recorder maxes out at 1080, so if your system's screen resolution is higher than 1080 and you want to record the full resolution, you'll need to use a different option. Open Broadcast Server is an open source system that you can use to do this. However, I've found it to be incredibly unreliable. For me, it has a terrible design and I don't recommend it. Another option is the free version of Active Presenter. It's very well designed, it's reliable, and will record whatever resolution your system uses. I use it to record my screen in 5K, and it works incredibly well. Setting it up and using it is pretty straightforward, but it really exceeds the scope of this video. I've linked to an excellent tutorial on how to use it, as well as a link to the download site for the software in the description of this video. One caveat is that if you are recording a screen larger than 1080, you may experience performance issues with Active Presenter, so be mindful of that. This brings us to a video editor. Here you have a number of options and you don't need to spend a penny on them. If you use Windows 10, it comes with a rudimentary video editor for free. It's called, oddly, Video Editor. It's part of the Photos package. To get to it, go to your search box and type Video Editor. It'll come up at the top as an application. Go ahead and click on it to launch it. In the interest of brevity, I'm not going to include lessons on how to use this application, but you will find a link to an excellent video on how to use this in the description of this video. I've worked as a professional editor in the past, and as such, I prefer to work with a more professional suite of tools. If you're interested in a more advanced application for editing that's also free, look no further than DaVinci Resolve. There's a paid version and a free version. None of the features in the paid version will have any impact on your FS 2020 videos. It has a maximum output resolution of 4K, but no watermarks or anything else. I'll put a link to the free version in the description. I'll also link to some video tutorials in the description. Everything you need to become proficient in Resolve can be found on YouTube. I'll be showing a few things using Resolve as my editor as this video progresses, but I'll assume that the viewer is unfamiliar with the application and explain things appropriately. Music can be an incredibly evocative element for your videos, and I highly recommend using it. You can use the music that plays in the menus of FS 2020. Just do a screen recording of how long you need of the music, and then just add the music portion of that file to your video project. Another option is the YouTube Creator's Music Library. You're free to use any of this music in your projects if you intend to put them on YouTube, and you'll never get hit with a copyright notice. Using it will make ads appear in your videos. These are used to pay the authors of the music. If you already monetize your YouTube channel, part of your ad revenue will go to the music's author as well. While YouTube categorizes this music as free, it's clearly not, since your video ads will be subsidizing the cost of using the music. This section is going to cover composition, lighting, and camera movement in that order. If you're already versed in one of the topics, feel free to skip ahead to the other parts of this section. I'll discuss the golden ratio and the rule of thirds, as well as other compositional elements such as framing and horizon position. These are all just guidelines. All of these rules can be broken, but it's a good idea to understand them before you break them. At the end of the day, it's your video and your aesthetic choices, and there's no wrong way to do this. Before we talk about composition specifics, I wanted to point out one trick that you can use that I mentioned previously. It'll give your videos and screenshots a more cinematic look, and that is to matte the shot and make it widescreen. If you intend to do this, you need to be mindful of it when you create your shot and compose it with the widescreen framing in mind. If we add this effect in the DaVinci Resolve editor, we can also slightly reframe the shot within the matte. This can be useful when you need to move the horizon. Don't be afraid to take a shot whose composition is not exactly to your liking. You can zoom the shot in a bit when you edit it so that you can reposition it within the frame and create a more pleasing composition. This is also useful if you have an element around the edge of the frame that you want to eliminate. Let's start with the golden ratio. We have a nice visual guide that we can use to apply this compositional tool to your imagery. The golden ratio looks like this and shows where elements of interest should be placed in an image. It's a commonly used compositional tool. A video was posted to Vimeo that illustrates its use in the film There Will Be Blood. I've linked to it in the description, along with one to a photography article that discusses the use of this as well. The rule of thirds is also a very commonly used tool for composition. With it, the frame is segmented using 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines. Using this as a guide, we can create pleasing compositions by placing our primary subject of interest in the frame into one of the quadrants outside the center or at one of the line intersections. This is also very useful for setting a horizon line. Many FS 2020 videos that I see have pretty boring compositions. The horizon is centered in the frame at all times. Ideally, the horizon should bisect the frame so that the most interesting part of the visual occupies the largest part of the frame. It's that simple. The next thing to think about is lighting. FS 2020 allows us the ability to adjust the time of day. Lighting tends to look its best at the beginning or the end of the day. Sunrise and sunset. Sometimes you'll want to use a nice sunny, clear day, but many times sunrise and sunset will be your best bet, giving you the most dramatic lighting and nice long shadows. Another nice thing that FS 2020 does for us in terms of lighting is it allows us to change the date. Since the sun moves throughout the year, this can be useful. If you set up a nice sunrise shot, but the item of interest in your frame is not being directly lit, you can fix this. Just adjust the date and you can move the sun so that it better serves the needs of your composition. Our penultimate compositional tool is the frame. This is where you use a foreground element such as a tree's canopy in the shot to give your subject a frame, or using some other element that you find in the surroundings to create a framing element in the foreground. And this brings us to our final compositional consideration. When you're composing your frame, think about these 3 elements: foreground, subject, background. By separating these elements in our 2-dimensional frame, we add a sense of 3 dimensions to our shot. It gives it depth and adds to its realism. Clouds are another great option as well. FS 2020 allows for some pretty dramatic-looking cloud formations. These can also add a real sense of drama to what might be an otherwise pedestrian view of the Earth. Since you'll be taking images of an aircraft in motion in a lot of your footage, try to keep open space in front of the plane in the shot. Don't have the plane's nose ride the edge of the frame like this. Show that the aircraft has somewhere to go and is going there. Don't be afraid to do things over multiple times to get exactly what you want. The nice thing here is you're not at the mercy of the clock, the sun, or the weather. You've got control over all of it. There are plenty of videos out there that talk about setting the properties for the different camera views, but I thought we'd cover some of the presets that are provided. You'll find they can vary slightly from aircraft to aircraft. Many of these preset camera angles can be very useful in presetting the drone or external camera placement and are real time savers. Make sure you check them out on the different included aircraft as they'll vary. For example, the A320 includes this nice wing shot and engine shot, and you won't find those on the Cessna 172's set of presets. You can also use autopilot to improve the quality of your shots. If the aircraft is just flying with no one controlling it, it will tend to move around and it's difficult to predict what it's going to do. If you use autopilot to maintain your altitude and heading, you'll end up with a much smoother shot and less frustration. Autopilot isn't difficult to learn. I've included a link to a tutorial on using it in the description. My final comment on using it is to never engage active pause while you're using autopilot. You'll crash, as the autopilot does not like active pause. I've included a link to an article in the description that will help. The article will show you how to create an actual pause key for the sim that's not implemented by default. Theoretically, you could also set a waypoint for the aircraft to perform a nice banked coordinated turn while you film it using autopilot, but I haven't tested this. The showcase camera allows you to control the depth of field. What is depth of field, or DOF? It's the ability to control how much and what is in focus in your shots. In this example, the muzzle of the gun is in focus, and then the focus is shifted back to the bottle in the background. This screenshot was created using the drone camera's DOF setting. It's a pretty weak effect in my opinion, almost useless, and it's pretty hard to control. You have a wide variety of control over camera movement in FS 2020. I use a game controller to manipulate the drone cameras. I find it affords more control than the keyboard. As seen in the opening cinematic sequence, I leveraged the pre-built camera shots of the Cessna 172 in the hangar. Don't be afraid to do the same for your videos. It's perfectly fine to use even non-FS 2020 clips to enhance your video. There's no rule here. It's entirely up to you. Just be mindful of copyright. Make sure that the material you post to YouTube and other public sites like Facebook is material that you're legally allowed to use. Another classic camera move is the reveal. Find an obstruction and use it to reveal the subject of your shot like this. Or just put the camera below the aircraft and move it up so the aircraft is revealed into the shot like this. Play around with all of the camera directions, moving fast or slowly towards your subject. These all convey different moods and feelings, so feel free to go crazy. As an added bonus, I'm going to show you how you can reproduce the Hollywood compression shot. Colloquially known as the vertigo or Jaws shot, it's used in many Hollywood films. The effect was first used in the film Vertigo. This shot has since been used in many other films, including Goodfellas and Jaws. The effect is achieved by moving or dollying the camera in one direction while performing a zoom in the opposite direction. Since many of your shots have the camera moving forward, it's easy to reproduce this. You can take the shot into your video editor and zoom it in. Then animate the zoom effect moving backwards and recreate the effect. Using Resolve for this example, I set a starting zoom point and tell it to keyframe this point. Then I move to the end zoom point and I set a keyframe at that point. Resolve then creates an animation between these 2 points for me to create the desired effect. In this shot, I have the aircraft on active pause and I move the camera backwards past the aircraft. So I zoom the shot in as the camera moves back and get the same kind of effect. You can play around with this as you see fit and add a little spice to your videos with it. Many video editing systems come with a wide variety of shot transition presets. It can be very easy to overuse these and create tiresome or jarring effects in your videos. Typically, the straight cut from one shot to the next should dominate your video, and a cross-dissolve like this can be used to convey the passage of time or soften an otherwise jarring transition between 2 different shots. I'm not saying not to use them, but just remember that less tends to be more in this instance. When you load into the sim, give it a moment to load all the textures up. Sometimes it takes the program a minute to get all the textures loaded up so that you get the best looking shots you can. Additionally, be careful with the zoom control on the drone camera. It can produce very bad results in the distance where trees and other objects take on a very odd geometrical look. Watch aviation films and documentaries. Learn from the shots that those professional cameramen use. There's a great Canadian aviation TV series included with Amazon Prime that you can watch called The Aviators. A great documentary with some amazing aerial photography is 1/6 Right. I think you can rent the Blu-ray of this from Netflix or rent a digital version of it from Amazon. Certainly check out the videos on their website. Learn from the pros. Have fun. Don't take it too seriously, and remember that the rules are there to be broken. Break them and express yourself in unique ways. I hope that Microsoft improves the tools that we have for creating videos. Certainly the ability to animate certain controls such as zoom and DOF would be nice to have. Time will tell. That's it for this video. I hope you got something out of this and that you can now make some amazing cinematic videos from the amazing application that is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. If you didn't like the video, please make sure to hit the dislike, but if you liked it, please hit the like, as that really lets me know if these videos are helping folks. Until the next video, take care.